Hi, I'm John Mayfield, the real estate tech guy with another Global Real Estate School podcast. Hey, thank you so much for joining the podcast. My name is John Mayfield, the real estate tech guy, and this is episode 249. We are on private controls. It is down under section 2 of the PSI outline, land use controls and regulations. We're all the way down to number 5, section C, and we are on number 1. There we go, section C, which talks about private controls. A lot of information here, and as you've known from previous podcasts, I love John Riley's book, The Language of Real Estate. Great book. I always encourage you to check it out. It's great to have while you're going through the real estate course, but it's also just a great reference. So if you are an agent and you don't have this on your desk or close by, you need to buy it. It's a great book. So I'm going to refer to John's information because there's a lot of information. They're telling us that you could see 2 questions from Section C, private controls. But when we talk about deed conditions or restrictions, man, a lot of information to unpack here and look at. Now, let's just start with deed restrictions, okay? In John's book, he talks about covenants and conditions. Covenants, he says, are unconditional promises contained in contracts, the breach of which entitles a person to damages. Okay? That's a covenant, a promise, right? A condition, on the other hand, are contingencies. And really, it further makes sense when you go on and read down because covenants have the words promise, undertake, agree. Again, those would all be covenants, where conditions are words of if, when, unless. Okay, kind of get the difference there. Again, covenants are unconditional promises contained in contracts. Conditions, on the other hand, are contingencies, if, when, and so forth. Now, he mentions here that conditions may be either precedent or subsequent. Oh, man, this is why you really need those flashcards because we really get into some of these things and you have to write this information down and think about it. But what's the difference between precedent or subsequent? Well, a precedent condition must happen or be performed before a right or an estate is created. So it's in the beginning of precedent. Subsequent means if you were to violate one of these things or do something, then you run the risk of possibly losing that estate or losing the right to that type of estate. For example, you could never sell liquor on the property. Okay. We call that a fee simple defeasible, but is it a condition subsequent, which means if you do this, or is it just a fee simple defeasible? And, on the exam, they're not going to get really that deep and technical into the legal side. However, you do need to understand things about conditions or covenants because they will, what we call, run with the land. In other words, they will go forward. So my wife and I bought a farm once, and one of the restrictions on the farm was that there could never be any other business on the property. Well, that restriction was put on the deed, and so my wife and I had that restriction that was on the deed, and it was subsequent. So it's like if you ever violate this, then you run the risk of, the owner could run the risk of legal action. Now, again, they won't get into that type of deep legal question, but they will want you to know that if John Carr buys this property and he sells it to Mary Smith, does Mary have to abide by all those same things? And the answer is yes, it runs with the land. Now, private restrictions, on the other hand, are restrictions that might be put in a subdivision. And so those are enforced by the subdivision association, not the municipality, okay? The municipality may have restrictions, but private restrictions would be enforced by the subdivision or the homeowners association. They love the question. I've heard about this and seen it for years and years and years, that somebody's doing something, building a playground, putting in a garden, and it's violating the homeowners association or it's over the setback lines. What should you do? And you have to do what is, go to court and get an injunction against that person to stop that work that's being done. And we've got lots of questions like that we cover at Global Real Estate School. But, a couple of things that I want you to take away from this specific podcast is that we can have covenants and conditions that are a part of a deed. We can also have restrictions in a subdivision, and those run with the land. And so whoever you sell the property to, they have to adhere to those same covenants, conditions, and restrictions. And again, restrictions are handled more through the association, the homeowners association, and not necessarily through the municipality. So lots of really in-depth information here. I think you need to understand those topics that we covered here today, and you'll be in good shape. Again, they could ask you 2 questions. They love that question about giving you this long story and telling you somebody's done something. What do you do? And you get an injunction to make them stop. So that would be the way to handle that situation. I'll pull one of those questions up and we'll take a look at that here in the near future. But we're going to cover in our next podcast, again, homeowners association regulations. We're going to get a little bit more in depth than that, but I think you're going to be fine on these types of questions. Just understand that those conditions, those covenants, those restrictions placed on the property will run with the land. Hey, as always, check us out at globalrealestateschool.com. We've got some great resources there for you. And don't forget about our YouTube channel, totally different from our podcast. We'd love for you to subscribe there, subscribe here, and as always, go out and make it a great day. Thank you for listening to the podcast for Global Real Estate School. I'm John Mayfield, the Real Estate Tech Guy. Go out and make it a great day.